The African Union summit in Mauritania is taking place amid unprecedented levels of forced displacement and irregular migration on the continent. Mauritania itself is known as a transit hub for migrants trying to reach the Mediterranean and eventually Europe. CGTN's Chao Mghono has more on that.
6.2 million African refugees and asylum seekers have sought protection outside their countries. More than 12 million Africans are internally displaced. The numbers are staggering. And with protracted conflicts in several African countries, it's feared they will rise. Those most at risk are women, children, the elderly, and persons with disabilities. Two conflicts in Africa stand out when it comes to displacement. They are the Democratic Republic of Congo and South Sudan. The African Union maintains it's committed to protecting refugees and migrants. 2019 has been declared as the African Year of Refugees, Returnees and Internally Displaced Persons. And the AU will be looking for durable solutions to forced displacement. But Mediterranean migration is another concern. The European Union is looking to work more closely with African governments, seeking ways to improve living standards on the continent. But European nations remain divided on how to handle migration. Rescue ships filled with hundreds of African migrants are now being turned away by countries like Italy. So, on the one hand, African governments need to come up with solutions to address migration and forced displacement to ensure conflicts end and people are protected. And on the other hand, the EU needs to come up with a solution to its migrant crisis that addresses the concerns of its members. Both are mammoth tasks, and a lasting solution will take time. Chao Mghono, CGTN.
And earlier we spoke to Evelyn Ayero. She's the Regional Advisor for Information, Counseling and Legal Assistance at the Norwegian Refugee Council here in Nairobi. We asked her to tell us more about the patterns of migration in Africa and whether authorities are doing enough to address displacement on the continent.
The migration patterns in Africa are mainly irregular. And from the Horn of Africa and Yemen, we are seeing irregular migration from mainly using the Gulf of Aden. We are seeing migrants taking the Gulf of Aden and moving to Djibouti and Somalia as migrant routes into Yemen, with, of course, the hope that they will get to their final destination, that is primarily the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and other Gulf countries. We also see that they're doing this with the support of smugglers. And on a journey that takes about 10 to 11 days, we are seeing migrants paying between $150 to $1,000 US to cross the sea into these destinations. What is worrying is that most of them are vulnerable, so we see large numbers of unaccompanied children, separated children, victims of trafficking, smuggled migrants, and also we are seeing those that have been maybe refugees that have failed to get asylum, and they're also taking into these routes, and economic migrants as well, those labor migrants that are looking for opportunities. We've also seen that in other parts of Africa, like West Africa, we are seeing Cote d'Ivoire, Nigeria and Ghana hosting large numbers of migrants, and there's been widespread criticism about the fact that these migrants are also moving into Europe. So we've seen that come out a lot. I think we see that these conflicts are causing lots of displacement, but on the other hand, we also need to look at the root causes of these conflicts. We cannot continue ignoring the politics or socio-economic factors and the different inequalities that are actually exacerbating these conflicts. So I think we need to look at the root causes as well. And so there is a need for both development partners and humanitarian actors that are responding to the development aspects in some of these countries, and also those that are responding to the displacement, to make sure that there is at least coordinated efforts to address both the root causes and the symptoms of these conflicts that have resulted in displacements of millions of people. it's very important that we look at the development approaches together with the humanitarian situation. But most importantly, countries like Mauritania need to also look at ways in which we can jointly address the root causes of migration. But also beyond that, strengthening the institutional capacity in their countries, looking at the countries like Mauritania that are transit countries, but also looking at how institutions in those countries can actually better manage migration, strengthening their capacity to look at rights issues, to look at other issues that are linked to law and order, and access to justice for these victims.